You are welcome to one of the interesting courses you will offer during your study in Lautech Open and Distance Learning Center, ACT 212, Accounting Information Systems. I'll be taking you through study section 4, titled Documenting Accounting Information Systems. Documentation explains how accounting information systems operate and is therefore a vital part of any accounting system. It describes the tasks for recording accounting data, the procedures that users must perform to operate computer applications, the processing steps that accounting information systems follow, and the logical and physical flow of accounting data through the system. This study session explains in greater details why accountants need to understand documentation and describe some tools for diagramming complex systems. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to understand why documenting and accounting information system is important. You should also be able to draw simple document flowcharts and explain how they describe the flow of data in AIS. Also, draw system flowcharts. Why documenting an accounting information system? On these slides are 9 reasons why documentation is important to accounting information system. Accountants do not need to understand exactly how computer process the data of a particular accounting application, but it is important for them to understand the documentation that describe how this processes takes place. Documentation includes all the flow charts, narratives, and other written communication that describes the input processes and outputs of an AIS. Documentation also describes the logical flow of data within a computer system and the procedures that employees must follow to accomplish the application tasks. Depicting how the system works is one of the reasons why we need to document AIS. Simply observing large AIS in action is an impractical way to learn about them, even if they are completely manual. In computerized system, this task is impossible because the processing is electronic and therefore invisible. The reason why we document AIS is also to train users. Documentation also includes the user's guide, manual, and other similar operating instructions that help people learn how an AIS operates. It is also used in designing new systems. Documentation helps system designer develop new systems in much the same way the blueprint helps architects design buildings. It is also used in controlling system development and maintenance costs. Personal computer applications typically employ pre-written, off-the-shelf software that is relatively reliable and inexpensive. In contrast, custom developed business systems often cost millions of dollars and can be less reliable. Good documentation helps system designers develop object-oriented software, that is, programs that contain modular and reusable codes. One of the reasons why we document AIS is also for the purpose of standardizing communications with others. The usefulness of narrative description can vary significantly, and a reader can interpret such description differently from what the writer intends. Documentation aids such as system flowcharts or data flow diagram as standard industrial tools, and they are more likely to be interpreted the same way by all parties viewing them. Auditing AIS. Documentation helps depict audit trials. When investigating an AIS, for example, the auditors typically focus on internal control. In such circumstance, documentation helps auditors determine the strength and weakness of the system control, and therefore the scope and the complexity of the audit. The reason for documenting AIS is also for business processes. It is also used for documenting business processes. Accounting systems automatically create a record of some organization processes because they capture financial data as they occur. A study of this process can lead to a better system. Now, complying with Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Section 404 of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 requires publicly traded companies to identify the major source of business risk, document their internal control procedures, and hire external auditors to evaluate the validity and effectiveness of such procedures. Documentation is therefore crucial for analyzing the risk of errors, fraud, omissions, and similar mistakes in important business processes, as well as helping auditors evaluate the controls used to mitigate such risk. That is, some of the major tasks required by SOX. Lastly, establishing accountability. Manual signatures on business and government documents allow employees and government agents to execute their responsibility, create audit trials, and establish accountability for their actions. An example is a signed checklist that outlines the month-end journal entries an accountant must perform. Such checklists verify that the accountant performed these tasks, that a reviewer approves them, and that both individuals are accountable for the accuracy of the work. The record suggests that insufficient or deficient documentation cost organizations time and money, and that good documentation is as important as the good software it describes. What tools are available to document AIS? We have document flowcharts and system flowcharts. The document flowchart traces the physical flow of document through an organization, that is, from the departments, group, or individuals who first create them to their final disposition. On these slides are symbols for document flowchart, and as you can see, the symbols are presented there along with what they represent. Here are guidelines for drawing document flowcharts. 1. Identifying all the departments that create or receive the document involved in the system. Use vertical lines to create swim lanes to separate each department from the others. Carefully classify the documents and activities of each department and draw them under their corresponding department heading. 3. Identify each copy of an accounting document with a number. If multiple copy documents are color coded. If multiple copy documents are color coded, use a table to identify the number color associations. 4. Account for the distribution of each copy of the document. In general, it is better to over-document a complicated process than to under-document it. 5. Use on-page and off-page connectors to avoid diagrams with lines that crosses one another. Each pair of connector A from and A2 connectors in each pair should be used in the same letter or number. Use annotations if necessary to explain activities or symbols that may be unclear. These are little notes to the reader that helps clarify your document. Item 8 on the guidelines for drawing document flowchart. If the sequence of record in a file is important, include the letter A for alphabetical, N for numeric, C for chronological in the file symbol as indicated in the guideline 7. You can also include a note in the flowchart to make things clearer. And lastly, most employee reference form with acronyms, e.g. G, RF, or in the preceding examples. Most employee reference form with acronyms. That means you can use employee reference forms with acronyms. To avoid confusion, use full names, possibly with acronyms in parentheses, or create a table of equivalents to ensure accuracy in identifying such forms. Lastly, consider using automated flow charting tool. These are the guidelines for drawing document flow chart. Now let's look at a system flow chart. Whereas document flow chart focuses on tangible documents, system flow chart concentrates on the computerized data flow of AIS. That is, a system flow chart typically depicts the electronic flow of data and processing steps in the AIS. Now, on this slide are symbols showing system flow charts. These are symbols you can use to represent or design your system flow chart, and each symbol has what it means written beside it, so you can go through it in your lecture materials. Now, These are guidelines for drawing system flowchart. System flowchart should read from the top to bottom and from left to right. In drawing or reading such flowchart, you should begin in the upper left corner. Because system flowcharting symbols are standardized, you should use this symbol when drawing your flowchart. Do not make up your own. A processing symbol should also be found between an input symbol and an output symbol. This is called the sandwich rule. Use on-page and off-page connector to avoid cross lines and cluttered flowcharts. Sketch a flowchart before designing the final draft. Graphical document software tools make the job easier. Add descriptions and comments in flowcharts to clarify processing elements. You can place this inside the processing symbol themselves. Include them in annotation symbol attached to process or file symbols, or add them in separate notes on your system document. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Thanks for listening.